Yama good day, everyone. Welcome to round table number 13. Good to have you all back. This week on the table we have Sharon, Naysay, Jules, Connie and Bernays, and me, Luna. And the subject for this week is what is guilt? A funny thing, it took me a while to get some questions on this, but this is what I come up with first. Guilt is an article of clothing that people make you wear. It's not until there's too many that we even know it's there. What is guilt? Was it given to us to keep ourselves in check? Is it a tool used by the dark ones? Or perhaps just a flaw in our humanity? Can it be a conglomerate of negative emotions mutated somehow? And why is it we judge people and find them guilty? Do we place guilt upon each other unknowingly? Are animals capable of feeling guilt? And why does guilt carry shame? And what decisions do we make out of guilt that necessarily could be positive things, but we're actually doing them out of guilt? And is guilt a positive, a negative, or a neutral emotion? So these questions and more. Anybody want to start? No? I can keep talking. Thinking about guilt, I had to think about a lot of things, and I even asked myself, do I do things out of guilt, and what do I do? And I realised sometimes I'm overly nice and I do things because I kind of feel guilty that I'm in a better position than that person, so I help them out. And that's not a bad thing. And I want to look at both faces of guilt, because I don't think we just see guilt as a heavy thing and it's shameful. People use it, and we see guilt as a negative thing most of the time. But when I realised that nice things come out of it, I thought there's more to this thing, guilt, than meets the eye. And then when I started looking to where it come from, I actually couldn't find its origin. Like some of the words that we've spoken about in the last few weeks, you can feel deep in your heart and spirit the origins of these words, and a lot of them are connected to Creator in a spiritual way. But when I was looking at guilt, I found it really hard to find its origin, as in why does it exist? What use does it actually have, other than making people shameful and keeping them under control out of guilt? So anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I have something. You guys all know that I went to AA for a lot of years, and we used to say in AA that if it wasn't for the Catholic Church and the Baptist Church, AA rooms would have been filled with empty ashtrays. And because, especially the Catholic Church, because I was brought up a Catholic till I was like 18 and I escaped, the programming is just all guilt. I think it's a little different now, but when I was there, mortal sins, venial sins, you always had to track them. If you died with mortal sins on your soul, you went straight to hell. It was just a baseball bat to use. And I think marketing, they use a lot of guilt for us to buy products. You can use guilt on your spouse, your friends. You know, I was thinking about this, Lena. I cannot think one good thing it guilt's for. Not one.
Yeah, I was finding myself like that. Even when you do nice things out of guilt, it's not genuine and solid from your heart. This is why I'm looking at its origin, and the question that came up was, is it a tool that the dark ones used? Because I was looking at that too. What's a positive thing about this? Like, you know, I'm starting to think that it's the fertilizer used to grow the flowers, because it's a bit crappy. And all I can think, every time I think of that word, I just see people that have had abuse in their life. And to me, that's what guilt is. Someone's put guilt upon them and abused them using guilt. And that's why I brought it up, because I thought there's got to be more to this word. You know, like even they associate the word guilt to food. I feel guilty. We say it all the time. Me and Naysay say it. I had a milkshake. I feel guilty now. It's going to wreck my body. Yeah. It's one of those weird words. And it was donated by Polly, by the way, who didn't turn up tonight. He left us with this word. No one would swim around going, what is it? What is it?
Well, then Polly's guilty. Wasn't guilt originally something about debt, that you owed somebody? And now if you actually owe somebody something, that's one thing. But if somebody puts it upon you that you owe it to them, that's guilt by a different horse.
Yeah. Sorry, I had to.
I was just going to say the word should is attached to
Should. I have an extra person on our table, but they're not actually on the table because they're here with me. We're sharing a seat.
We have a go seat. It's in the corner.
Oh, you can take Polly's seat in the corner. And this is Lisa, so I should have introduced her. I should have introduced her.
No, I said I wasn't going to do it.
She didn't want to. But you can't help it, can you?
No, because that's what I was just sitting here thinking. When I think about guilt, I think about it's always attached to what I think I should do. Like when I feel guilty, I think, I should have done that. And so lately I've been just thinking about that whole thing of what should. I've pretty much come to the point of saying, well, I just need to avoid anything that has the concept of should attached to it, because I was spending a lot of time feeling guilty, and then you're not thinking about what you actually are doing. It's not as simple as I'm doing it or I'm not. You just stay suspended in this place of you should do.
Yeah.
But we talked.
Completely relate to that, and then the longer you sit there and you stew on it, it brings you. You bring yourself down. You come into that realm of negativity.
And it's funny when you were saying that, Lisa, all I could see was the adult looking at the child going, you should do this, you should do that. Placing guilt upon that poor child.
I mean, just sitting here thinking about guilty, it's like we're talking about guilt, and I feel guilty for not doing anything more than like letting this be a learning experience for me. I'm here with pen and paper because I know there's something that's going to come up, and guilt is going to be one of those words that is just what it is. But we'll see.
Well, this word came about from last week's discussion. If anyone was here last week or they've listened to it, do we lose our innocence? And we had a really, really good talk about that. But at the end of the talk, we got to the point of guilt, because it's kind of the opposite. Like I think we would discuss that guilt was the opposite of innocence somehow, and it led to this week's discussion. You wait till I get a hold of Polly. It was his idea. No, and that was I was going to put what's the opposite to guilt. I thought, we talked about that last week. It's innocence, guilty and innocent. This is serious.
So are you talking about guilty as part of this discussion tonight? Is guilt and guilty both words something you're discussing?
Yes, because they came up last week. We were talking about innocence, and do we lose our innocence, and do we regain it? How do we regain it? And towards the end of the discussion, we all come down to the fact that it came down to guilty and innocent and carrying guilt. And not carrying guilt means that you're innocent because you're not carrying anything. And unless we went on for another 2 hours, which we didn't, we brought it to this week. But then as I was looking at the word guilt, I opened up a whole new can of worms, as I said earlier on. And it feels daunting talking about this word guilt. Like, I feel like I have to have a torch on while I talk about it.
Yeah, because it's kind of daunting and dark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's negative, it's dark, it's soul sucking. That word should. I mean, that just right there is a beacon of negativity waiting to happen.
But then I go back to the word guilty, which, so I think court, the rule of law, And so are you know guilty or innocent, and guilty of a crime is different than guilt. 'Cause to me, guilty of a crime is you did wrong. I mean, somebody proved you did wrong. Guilt, sometimes I wonder if what is all in our heads. It's all in our thoughts.
That's what I'm more leaning to.
Well, yeah, and for it to be there, because children aren't born with guilt. It's placed upon them somehow. That's where the word should come in, the parent going, you should do this, you should pick up your stuff, you should be polite, you should be this.
I was also thinking it was a bit
I
of
think it's part of our programming. I mean, if I go back to
Yeah.
the Catholic Church, I mean, the Catholic Church had well, I'm gonna use had because that you know I left at 18, but it had some good things about it. I mean, it taught spiritual principles. You know, it taught prayer. It taught us to have good moral fiber inside. You know, like you know, in some ways, but they had all this guilt dripping from it, and for me, that was so that you would go to the priest and confess your sins because you weren't able to talk to God straight away, straight through. You know, you didn't have the direct connection like the priest did. And that was one of the reasons I left because I thought this is bogus, right? And I left too because I felt like the nuns were getting a really bad deal. They got to do all the cleaning and take care of the kids, and the priests got to get promoted to being cardinals and popes. And the nuns were never going to get that kind of gig. So I actually left because I thought this is ridiculous. This is so archaic. I
Yeah.
got to get out of here. And at 18, I remember walking out that door for the last time consciously saying, I'm done. This is a stupid place to be. And I never really joined another religion again, ever.
It's funny because
And I, go ahead.
I was just thinking, Sharon, I actually had one question that I scribbled out, and when you're talking about that hierarchy, about the priests and the nuns and then the poor kids, the question, it was like resurrect that question, because that's what I saw. It spills out. If one uses guilt, is it because they are full of it and it spills out? And what I saw is the priests using the guilt upon the nuns, who use the guilt upon the children. And
I
they-
think the whole Catholic religion is based on guilt. I mean, okay, and this goes back to marketing and sales and how some products are sold to us either through guilt or fear. Like if you're a good parent, you're doing vax, right? Okay, so if we just take the jib jab,
Yep.
it jib jabs, the jib jabs. If you're a good parent, you're jib jabbing everybody, right? You're making sure that this is a done deal, and you're a member of society that's acting responsible. Okay, and I'm talking about all jib jabs. I mean that kind of guilt, right? You know, or fear. You know, if you don't get insurance, you're going to be destitute. If you don't, you know, so it's
Yep.
it's like this big carrot stick, but mostly it's the stick.
Yep.
And so undermining the religious innocence, maybe, of the Catholic Church, which could have been a really awesome ride, I had to give up the good stuff because I felt like the guilt overrode it. And it took me a long time to deprogram myself from mortal sins and venial sins. Like you said, drinking a milkshake, you feel guilty. I mean, it was just like stupid stuff like French kissing your boyfriend or having sex, or they were like, okay, well, if you get hit, we used to joke when I was in high school and we would go to catechism. If you got hit by a truck and you had a mortal sin on your soul, you went straight to hell. If you only had venial sins, many sins, you went to purgatory. We don't know how long you're in purgatory, but you're there for a while. I mean, what kind of crap is that? Jeez.
I was actually just thinking about guilt being used as a tool. Like it is something that we use. It's something that I think it actually gets used a lot more than what we perhaps think. Like when we talk about a stick, I reckon we can all wield our own. Because as you say, like even with vaccinations, or that's in your daily interactions, or if you choose not to get vaccinated, somebody, either way, it's because you're taking a position of finding somebody else guilty of not doing something they should have done, or you know what I mean?
But
It really translates in our personal behaviour, but we use it on our kids. My God, I've created masters of it. My children are just, honestly, they wield guilt like you would not believe. It's like,
Shame on you.
right? It's a tool. But then I can also take that to perhaps a little bit of a different space and say, like, even with elders or shaming, like shaming itself is not. We shame itself sometimes needs
It's
to be
like
called.
guilt.
Sometimes needs to be called out. And the reason we were talking about this last night is we were watching this video of a protest down in Melbourne, right? And at this protest, and it's not even about vaccination or not vaccination, really. It's about rights and what the hell is going on, like seriously. But we were talking about one of the guys that got up with the microphone is now a former police officer because he's not vaccinated. So all that kind of stuff happens. But there was all the police. Every other protest that's happened down there has been really, really full on. There's been violence. There's been all kinds of just crazy shit with crazy stuff with the police down there. But this time the police walked with them and then just stood in the background of them calmly. And then one of their former fellas was basically calling out the building behind them. They went down to Parliament House or something, didn't they? Yeah. But it was funny because I was sitting there thinking, for me personally, because I now am feeling the consequences of everybody else's, I don't know, I'm guilty. I am not vaccinated, so apparently now I'm guilty. I look at how easily, it gets used for a tool, and we do it ourselves and whatever, but we're judging those police there. But there was this moment in this protest down there, because it was a copper that was on that side. He was saying, it's not these guys here. This whole thing is bullshit. Because, this is unlawful, and none of us should be made to do that because these guys behind me don't want to be doing that anyway. They're supposed to, And then there was this moment where the crowd, because it was so amped up, just started singing out, "Come join us." But I just thought to myself, the spirit that it came in was really...
You asked me.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like really, really embracive, yeah? And I thought that only got achieved because at some moment there in all of this whatever hysteria going on, some moment there it was together. You know what I mean? The judgment just lied. We were allowed to be human and go, you know what? Yeah, it's just bullshit. We're all dealing with this bullshit in our own way. You know what I mean? But the end of that speech was him pointing to the building behind him and the whole crowd going boorah, you know?
Lisa,
Drop the guilt. Let's not do this shit.
Lisa actually asked me the question: who's guilty there?
Yeah.
The guy, the policeman in the front, talking. He seems innocent. Does that mean that the policemen at the back are guilty? And I just said, "What did I say to you? Be quiet, and we'll talk about that tomorrow." But that was my question. Why do we? What is it? Why is it we judge people and find them guilty? It's something automatic in us. There will be a point in the day where, we'll pick on vegetarians because I'm a vegetarian, where the vegetarian will look at the person sitting there with 4 steaks on their plate, they're half raw and blood dripping off and going, yum, 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 that's really good. And the vegetarian's sitting there going, the poor animal. And they're looking at this person with guilt. They've got guilty hanging around their neck for killing this animal. You know what I'm saying? There's something built in us where certain points come along, and if we don't watch how we are, we will look at these people and judge them and deem them guilty for whatever.
We all do it.
We all do it, yeah. And that's what the question was. Is it a flaw in our humanity, or is it something someone put in there?
Could it be that's what makes us humans?
But if
What
we're
do you
guilty,
mean?
who said?
I mean, well, kind of in the sense that I never thought talking about guilt would be one of those topics that, because there's so many different kinds of guilt, personal guilt,
Yeah.
and then those powers that shouldn't be, they want us guilty because from that guilt we're pressured, and then that goes into fear, and then it's panic mode for them, and they're easy. It's I can kind of I feel guilt, and it encompasses everything that's going on in the world.
Right.
There's a
It's a
lot
it's
of
a
guilt out there. I can't pinpoint it because there's so much guilt.
it's a battering ram. It's like a baseball bat tool. It's part of the program, and people like if I look going back to the jib jab real quickly. What I am consistently hearing now here in California in the Bay Area is that my not doing the jib jab, it's like they justify the fact that they did the jib jab and the
Yeah.
fact that there's all these breakthrough things. So let's not think about the breakthrough, which is so stupid, the breakthrough cases. So it's very easy to say, well, if you non-jib jab people would just get on board, we'd be all done with this. But because you haven't jib jabbed, we're having breakthrough cases. And somebody used the smallpox issue, right? Back in the day, they made everyone take the smallpox jib jab because they said this was so dangerous to society. They're measuring COVID next to smallpox, which is ridiculous. And one of the ex congressmen who's starting a new party, which is laughable, is because it's just Democrat light, said that he believes in mandates because we need to do what we did back in the day, And it's so again, all I hear is guilt. You're right, Jules. That's all I hear is guilt, and it's shoved at me, and it's divisive. So, but at the end of the day, it's divisive. It's like a
Yes.
baseball bat. It
Yes.
it keeps us divided, and it gives the other side a justification for throwing me in the gulag rather than all of us standing together like with the police officers and turning around towards the powers that should not be saying F you.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were talking that guilt free. What makes you guilt free? And I heard exactly that word, F you. Well, I've got this saying, it's amazing how good you feel when you don't give a two hoots. And is that us going, hey, guilt, we don't really care about you.
Right.
We're going
Well,
anyway.
You know what? But what's happening, Luna, and I just want to throw this real quick, Bernie, so I don't forget. What's happening is all I heard from the congressman today was, "Here's another gatekeeper. Here's another guy who's just been sent out there to put another layer of deception that's not even real.
Oh,
It's just BS."
That's funny. We heard the same message, Sharon. That's really amazing. It's a little bit off topic, but we got up this morning and saw something, and Carl said, what do you think of that? And I went, I can smell deception in that. He goes, so can I. And then we started poking around, and it's like, wow. I said, it's like a ruse, and now you're saying it as well. Here's another one doing it. We're sensing the same thing. We can sense this falseness just there to keep us occupied, and it has so many phases.
If you're not sensing, it's right out of a playbook.
Right.
Everything has been step by step by step to nudge, to push, to make you comply. This was written out beautifully. And the thing that triggered me most in the last couple days was I saw somebody made up a meme, and it was Bill Gates, and it was his control of the Windows operating system, and now his control of the vaccine or the jib jab. And it's like, how did the world come to the point that a group of like-minded individuals could drive this message down the throats of the world without them thinking that there's going to be some type of pushback or blowback, because you're not going to be able to totally keep the lid on it. And as we've seen, it's just progressing and progressing and progressing more and more out what is actually going on. The more and more people balking at it here in Detroit. Now, they'll wear a mask. They'll go to the store with a mask. They'll wash their hands. But to get the dip dab, no. Nobody's going to be playing that game. You don't guilt street people. You can't guilt street people. You have to catch them in something to put the force on them, but you can't just guilt them.
That's funny. Yeah, I've got two things there. One, I think the powers that should not be, as naysay sees, they harnessed guilt and shame, and it's working for them really well at the moment. And the other one, I was talking to my friend Lisa, who's here at the moment, last night about street smarts. I said some people know street smarts, some people don't. And those who do know street smarts, it's really hard to pull the wool over their eyes.
Well, and I think that, again, what was so impressive today, listening to the radio, where this guy, the congressman got on there and said, no, there needs to be mandates. 3 or 4 people called in, and they nailed that guy to the cross, borrowing the cross, nailed him to the cross big time. And so this happened real time. It's like, take your little lousy BS, Jack, and get out of here. We know who you are. We know what you're trying to sell us. And I was so impressed. So we're catching on real time. It's, sure, come on the radio and give us your little options here. But again, this guy had always sold himself as a scholar of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Well, all of this is against that, especially the mandates. The mandates are definitely against the Bill of Rights. So, yes, we call BS. And like you guys caught it, like you said, Luna, you guys caught it yesterday. Mm-hmm. Real time. Mm-hmm. This is just more gatekeeper crap.
It is.
We don't even have a Bill of Rights in Australia.
No, we don't. We were going to ask for one.
You guys have, but we all
have
are
a constitution, but not a Bill of
Rights.
Yeah.
Right, Lisa? I mean,
and
whether
Crown
they
Land apparently
admit that or not,
so,
we know inside our hearts we're sovereign human beings.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's not really
Well,
the case.
what I see here, they're doing what they want to do. They're using guilt and shame straight on us. No matter which way we go, they'll make us shame for this or guilt for that.
But you reckon it's the smart side? You've already been found guilty. Well,
some
already, I was thinking you're already taking this position now, but other people are experiencing it for the first time. But you've already, so what?
Yeah, because street smarts are
You've already done so what for so many years.
Yeah, it's just natural for us to keep saying so what.
You're going to judge me as undesirable, really, just now?
But no, I've seen people fall. Look, some of our mob have fell through guilt and shame. They've enticed them with money and they've shamed and guilt them by saying, oh, your elders, you've got to do this and that because of your elders. And they've walked straight into the trap. And why it got me cranky, because they used guilt and shame on us last time. And it worked, it has evil faces, I'm telling you. And what is the connection between guilt and shame? Now, they work really hand in hand, because shame feels like guilt, but it's just got a little bit of a different tune.
I'm sorry, but you just triggered me there on your wording, guilt and shame. And what was in the Bible that started Adam and Eve? It was the guilt and shame of realizing they were naked. So this is born into us. This is something that is in us. We're conceived in original sin. It's something that's driven in that I doubt if we could ever change. I don't know if I believe in my one buddy's saying that guilt is a needless emotion. I guess if everybody had morals to a certain level, and I'm not going to be the one to judge that level, but then you wouldn't need guilt. But I don't know.
You see,
So
Adam,
the-
Adam and
Bernays,
Eve.
are you saying that maybe it's a part of her conscience? You know, like everybody has a conscience. I don't mind having that. I don't mind having a conscience that says, "Hey, do you think you should do that?" You know what I mean? What you know,
Yeah, that's
like
when
a sense
guilt's a
of
teacher, hey?
responsibility.
Yeah.
So can guilt be a part of that?
I think in anything that you do in life, you're going to look at it and is it going to be good for yourself? Is it not going to be good for yourself? Is it going to harm somebody else? I believe we all had that up in our heads really fast when we're about to do something, and that conscience that you're using the term of it will tell us right then whether we're doing it within our scope, within what we allow ourselves to do in morality's sake, that we will not get guilt. But then again, there's sometimes that you'll do something because you're going to do it for your own pleasure. So that can be eating, that can be sex, that could be drugs, that can be rock and roll, that can be anything for your own pleasure. But at that point, are you hurting yourself? I mean, we can tumble down this rabbit hole or I could at least.
Okay, Jules, no say Polly. Polly's joined the table. The corner seat is
That
full.
was the silent moment for
The silent truth. Yeah, when it goes silent on this show, you know that truth is reigning and it rings through every speck of the air, and there's a moment of silence and we pay it respect because truth rings and we like truth, as ugly as it can be. Even the ugliness of the words we're discussing today, guilt and shame wasn't even in it, but shame kind of popped in and just decided to join guilt in this conversation.
Well, get guilty party off the mute and have him start talking.
Yeah, Polly, we're going to put the guilt and shame on you because it was your word. But see how easily we can do it? It's so much of our life, part of our life. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm wondering now when Sharon said about Adam and Eve and the guilt, the shame, the guilt of seeing their bodies, I think that was the whatever they got tricked into. I think that's what it was. They got opened for a second to receive guilt and shame, and it stuffed their pathway up, and Creator's gone, oh, now I've got to kick you out because you're not pure anymore.
I think it was the original awareness of self. Before then, they were in perfect fellowship with God. And so it was all one. Nature, everything was in synchronicity. And when all of a sudden they disobeyed the one darn thing, I mean, they were in paradise. You kidding me? Anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I ought to say this too, because as you know, for our people, our traditional dress was very sparse, and it gets very hot here, so you don't want a lot of clothes anyway in summer. We had a certain way, and as you know, our mob is strict, and if you got caught looking at someone else's missus or someone else's hubby in that way, you'd get in big trouble, because we didn't have, back then there was no guilt and shame about running around half naked. We never had it.
I think that's a cultural thing.
It wasn't until the white fellas come and made us cover up out of their guilt and shame. Do you know what I mean? They'd look at us and they would feel weird about seeing us naked, so they made us cover up. But if they came to our way, they would realise and teach themselves not to make that wouldn't happen, because we never had it. And if you did, you got into trouble. So we were kind of taught out of it. Do you know what I mean? Not today, mind you. Today's they're just as normal as most people. Some of us, yeah.
I only the word just about Adam and Eve, about the clothing. There were several things written that I can't recall at the moment, Connie. I'm not trying to be disrespectful in any way.
I was thinking on that level when you said that. I thought when the moment they discovered they were naked. And I thought, what does that hold? You know, is that the moment where they discover they're vulnerable? Is that why God, or the concept of God changes in some way, or what happened? You know what I mean? So, beholding yourself naked. I mean, obviously, it went on to be you put clothes on it or you cover it up in some way. But I thought, is it as simple
I don't know,
as, is it as
no.
simple as just your own vulnerability?
I can smell something not right there.
I don't know.
And it isn't the
But
perfume.
that's what I'm throwing out. But what is with the naked? What is with the?
I think it goes back to guilt. I think there was an opening made to deposit guilt into their psyche, their being, their energy.
If they're naked, so what?
Because they were naked before.
Why was that guilty? Why,
That's what I'm saying. No, guilt was injected into them somehow.
Oh, guilt was the apple, apparently.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, guilt was the apple.
Yeah.
Somehow they bit it and they swallowed it and went in them.
Well, guilt is attached to giving into temptation, because that's how they present it. That's also why our nuns got a rougher trot of it, because they were basically, women, and the source of all sin.
So someone did
So
it.
it was all temptation.
But we're all guilty of continuing it, because none of us are innocent. Last week's word, none of us are innocent in not putting guilt on someone in some way, shape or form, even if it was a positive form of guilt where you felt guilty, so you went and helped that person. And a positive outcome came out of it, but you're actually motivated by guilt. So we're all guilty. I'm judging myself. You know what I'm saying though?
So are you saying that if we do something out of guilt, then it doesn't count?
No, it's still guilt, even if it's a positive, right? So if I go and help the lady next door because she's old and frail and I feel guilty, she's carrying in the shop and I should help her do that, I actually didn't do it because, there's a lady next door, I'll go and help her, and I did it out of my own energy. I did it out of feeling guilty first. But it was a positive outcome because I helped the lady bring in the shopping, right? But the actual motivation was still driven by my guilt that that word should be helping her.
Maybe if you're getting points and if you go out of love, you get 100 points, but if you go out of guilt, you only get 50 points.
It's really interesting you say that, because one of the things I wanted to throw out there was because obviously, lately there's been talk of with China and social credits, and they live under a system of that. Where you have credits within their social setting officially, and so if you don't, then
I don't agree
it
with
limits your transport, it limits what you can do, it limits a whole lot of, and I know that people may think every time, I don't know, that sounds incredulous, like as if that could happen, but really when you think about COVID passports, already that's saying if you do not have this particular socially accepted position, then you cannot go here or here. We're already, doing it. And that's a real subtle form, because it's amazing how many people I know that would ordinarily be, I don't know, different kind of people in this space. They get real judgmental, like it's a foregone conclusion that I bring it on myself. You know what I mean?
Oh man, I'm allergic to those words you just said. You mentioned those words. Yeah, I'm bullshitting around. I'm just stirring up. I can stir her up.
No, yeah, going back to what Lisa's saying, I agree with you. I think when you look at these passport things, I think people, like you said, people that would ordinarily stand up for the underdog, we're not considered underdogs. We're not even considered people who get to have a choice. Listen, look at what the congressman said today. You don't get this choice, Sharon. You get to be mandated. And what I wish a bunch of people called in and said, screw you. But I was thinking later, okay, Mr. Constitution and Bill of Rights, if I don't do the mandate, does that mean I go to a concentration camp? What should happen to me if I don't do the mandates, Jack? That's your next question. And again, where I might be considered, there's a bunch of underdogs, right? People that are homeless, and I'm not saying that isn't a good thing to think about, our fellow people and be careful and caring of them, but not about the jib jab. No.
And honestly, well,
there ain't no empathy for me.
Yeah, for me, I work in a school in community. And so from next Friday, my contract with the Department of Education will be terminated from their end because I'm not vaccinated. So I knew I had up until December to the end of the year before, they only do contract basis in this space. So, but it got terminated earlier because I'm not vaccinated, even though I work in a community hub and the community's not actually allowed on the school. So the mandate, the public health order that brought that about states about, and they brought it out first saying, school-based staff, and they base that whole thing around kids, and that's a whole different conversation. But for me, I've already been working off-site and from home for the last 18 months, and the way I move with the community now doesn't require me to be on the premises. But because I am just Department of Education, there's no flexibility or any option for me, so they're terminating my contract. And I was thinking in talking to Anne-Marie last night, there is massive differences of late between choice and consequences. Do you know what I mean? And my choices are also coming across like a fault. And I'm astounded because I am now no longer employed, even though I am well. And previously, the community I work with was winning trophies. We've like, I know where we were strong. I was, and then bang. And it astounds me that I am now the leper.
Do you feel guilty?
Fuck no. Oh, sorry. Not at all.
Good.
But am I living the consequences of I'm going to be unemployed?
So how do you not feel
what I mean?
guilty? Because how do you not feel guilty? They put this guilt on you. What is it that made you shun that guilt and not feel guilty? Can you recall that moment where you threw it off?
You know what? It's funny because it's been a hell of a year for me. And even when you see writing on the wall when things are happening. But I
Do you remember the moment you felt guilty? Did they actually make you feel guilty and you had to throw it off? Because remember...
Yeah, okay, I tell you where I felt guilty. Where my dad, who is elderly and just worries that I am not vaccinated.
And made you feel guilty.
Because what they get smashed with,
Oh,
he's just scared.
Thanks for using the
And then
V word.
I feel...
Thanks for using the V word half a dozen times.
Sorry. And then I feel guilty that I'm scaring him.
I just made her feel guilty
or I'm
with you.
upsetting him.
You realise it made you feel guilty like 3
did?
times
Oh
now.
my god! I'm victim to it. This is a conversation I even said I wasn't going to join in. I was going to leave it alone because I grew up under the vehicle of it as well. Religion.
See that? Lucky yous all live overseas because look at I'd pay out on yous all the time if you're in my presence. I'm just joking.
And you don't actually, you know what? One day you have to commit to meeting her in person because it's not just what her words are doing. If you're around her energy smacks you and pulls your tail and does all kinds
All
of
right,
things
enough
as well.
about me. Back to guilt.
I'm
You're
going
making
for a
me feel
smoke.
guilty now. All right, back to guilt and shame. Go on, get. No, she's right. But from what she was saying, when Lisa was speaking there, all I could see was someone putting an article of clothing on her which had guilt written on it. And if we all look, we will be surprised how much things we are wearing from other people. You don't know until there's too many, like that little poem said. You can have a couple of articles that are light, a little hat and maybe a light shirt, and you've been wearing them all your life and never knew that they had guilty on them, and someone put them on you and you just accepted to wear them. I realised that at one point in my life I was carrying guilt. It got quite heavy, and I realised I accepted to wear all these things. So I had to go through myself and take all those articles of clothes off and literally trace them back to their owners so I could walk light and free of guilt of something I didn't even know
love
how.
that analogy.
That's a great metaphor for wellness too.
Yeah. I personally think this is such a moment of truth. And, I'm in the kitchen cooking, listening to the lady on the radio just sock it to, and I'm screaming, yes, 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 say more. And I don't feel guilty about this. I feel like this is just part of their stupid ass game. And I'm actually hearing more and more people out here in the USA speaking these mandates, and they're against them. And they said, it's one thing if you give people a choice, it's another if you try to force them, right? And mandates are just, to me, guilt. They're just more guilt. It's like, look what you're doing to society and all that crap. So I think it's interesting that what you said and the fact that you have to give up your job, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, poor Lisa,
So-
yeah. She's had a bad run. That was the most recent one. Actually, I went to see a friend last night and he was really depressed, and I'm like, what's the matter? And he said, I lost my job. I said, why? Someone sent an email against him saying when he's a plumber, so he turned up to do a job, and they implied in the email that when he got there he was cranky and was throwing things around and stuff like that, and he said he wasn't. And he was feeling guilty, honestly, because someone had said something that he hadn't done. He lost his job, but I could still feel the guilt on him. And I'm thinking, well, you haven't done nothing wrong, bro. You shouldn't be feeling as bad as you are.
This reminds me, Luna, of a fervent, like, out of your mind religion. There is almost a radical fervence of I've heard literal people. Okay, if I talk loud, tell me, because when I get worked up, my voice starts getting loud.
Talk loud,
All
Connie,
right.
go on.
Okay, so I've actually heard people say, I just would love to watch them die a long, horrible, painful death. That's what they get for not getting vaxxed. And they meant every word. And I thought that person is just, they don't even know what they sound like. They're unaware of how crazy
Because
sometimes
possessed. They're demonic.
it's all
All right,
about control
all right.
and bowing your knee. And they love showing everyone submitting and bowing their knee. All of it from the very beginning. I knew it was diabolical. I knew it was about control from the beginning of the mask. I said, I'm not doing any of it. It's a lie. I just knew it. I don't even know how. I just thought it was all crazy. And then it just got crazier. But I wanted to just say that talking about guilt, I really pondered this for years and years because of religion and being in the institutional church. And once I got out of that, I started to really have a lot of my beliefs very challenged by myself. Like, do you really believe that? That doesn't seem right. So, anyway, I think that there is a difference between guilt, which is described biblically as sorrow of the world or the world system. And then conviction is called the sorrow that God brings to bring you to turning from something that is going to harm you back on the right path. So it always is associated for me with grace. So if I hear that voice in my head, look at you, you are such a loser, you call yourself a Christian, just any of that shit, I know right away, that's not right, spirit. And I just, in the name of Jesus, say, if there's something I need to learn, Holy Spirit, my ears are open. And He can always show me even really painful things about myself because it's always with, come on, like He comes up alongside me and it's helping, He's assisting me. He's correcting me like a loving parent rather than beating me what a loser I am and nothing is good about you and you're just selfish and you're just this and that. So that's pretty much what I had to say.
I love that. And I think what I keep coming back to, and it's been very difficult to come back to this, is because they are using so much guilt. What I've come to, and like I said, is really hard, is they don't like us. They really don't like us at all. We're just useless pieces of crap to them. I'm talking about the powers that shouldn't be. And, why should we ante up to the bar to people who don't like us at that point, because at that point there's never going to be enough, and I think that that point guilt doesn't work, because if you look at somebody and you think to yourself, no matter what I do, it's never going to be good enough anyway, you're free.
Or I
Right.
turn it around and I think you don't know me, so I really
Right.
could give a flying flip what you think about me.
Yeah.
And I know who I am, so I don't need to look outside for people to approve or disapprove of me. I mean, I care what people think, but it's not going to move me in things that are my personal convictions. That's who I am. That's my solid ground, and I'm not moving. Thank you. And I'll be polite as you treat me. But if you're rude, get out of my space and face, or I will say, F off.
Right.
The reason I said demonic is I can't believe the spell casting that's on these people.
I can.
Over basics.
Coming out from everybody all over the place. Crazy.
Over
Crazy stuff.
principle, they're spell cast a guy on television. It make the same way you said that you knew is the same way I felt immediately when I saw it happening. The first words out of my mouth was control. That's all this is going to become. And then they added the frills and dressings that you're speaking of, that to get people to turn against people that
Right.
I can't believe I'm seeing in my lifetime. So
I just look at it, Bernays, as the beast system. And I just came out of it a long time ago. The systems are all corrupt right now. They're broken. They're dark. They are not what I grew up with. At least it's all showing itself in all its grand disorder, chaos, and just plain meanness.
Yes.
you can't lie. Yeah, I know meanness. It's almost like you can't lie right now. You're going to get caught somewhere down the line.
I think the same
I think
thing.
too, Connie, that there's a lot of layers of programming. It's not just one layer. It's years of programming they've been doing this.
But however many years of the truth you've been seeking, it unprograms. Yeah, if someone says you're brainwashed, yeah, my brain needed washed. It needs scrubbed every day. The world just seeps in, its philosophies, its viewpoints. It just does. We're in it, but we don't have to be of it. There's a big
Right.
difference.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Good evening, all.
There's true.
Good evening, Polly. Good to
evening,
hear from you.
Polly.
Go on, give it to us, brother. Oh, he said hello and then disappeared. No, he's back again.
Well, there he is.
Technical problems. We're having technical problems. There's a force in the Discord. I just want to point before Polly gets sorted out there. We're talking about what is guilt. We identified the fact that guilt had a not nice energy, and if we all check our energy right now, we'll find that we've fallen into its trick. So we need to up it a little bit and observe this word with a bit more light. So how are you going there, Polly? How's your tech going? No? Not happening.
Ollie, do you need to go to settings and change your
Yeah,
voice?
we're having a few problems here. So, all right, we'll continue on.
Or sound? Ollie, try going to settings and change your sound if you need to.
It's
Can't hear
nothing
you.
like technical problems when you're trying to
Right.
have a conversation.
It's hard.
In your computer system settings,
Yeah.
not in Discord.
Hi everybody! How's
Hi.
everybody doing tonight?
We're
I
good.
hope you're all feeling fantastic.
Fantastic. If I may indulge me for a moment as I talk to the almighty Siri. What is guilt?
The domestic pig, often called swine hog or simply pig, when there is no need to distinguish it from other.
No, she's not answering. That's not what she told me just before I got off. What's the definition of guilt?
Which word? G-I-L-T or G-U-I-L-T?
G-U-I-L-T.
Guilt is a moral emotion that occurs when a person believes or realizes, accurately or not, that they have compromised their own standards of conduct or have violated universal moral standards, and bear significant responsibility for that violation. Would you like to hear more?
Yes.
Guilt is closely related to the concept of remorse, regret, as well as shame. Guilt is an important factor in perpetuating obsessive-compulsive disorder symptoms.
Now, I think he'll believe that we are all guilty depending on the perspective and the precious moment that is observed for the fact of the matter. As Luna stated earlier, there's times where I'll say I'm guilty of eating nightshade, and I feel this guilt because I know eating nightshade is bad for my individual. It causes inflammation in my circumstances. So I feel guilt for that. Now, in the positive, neutral, negative aspect of it, how can guilt be good? Well, I hear Luna's example of feeling guilty because there's somebody who's physically not able to accomplish something and you come in and you assist that person. You know, my knowing of nightshade family causes me to minimally use it, but then I'm guilty of not doing that. Excuse me. When we go into a court of law, depending on the situation, because of a society gathered together in a community, they created laws and standards for everybody within the community to abide by. And if that is not occurring, then people are able to address their grievances and address their accuser and go to a court of law, and hopefully in a habeas corpus where you are judged by a jury trial of your peers, then a verdict is made, guilty or innocent. You know, so the challenge, I believe, is when that guilt pulls you into the negativity, into the darkness. That is when it's, it is negative, but then other people will use it as a control mechanism, or, just like with parents, who ate this cookie? But it's also a tool of where somebody can take accountability and have integrity to do an admission of guilt. You go into a store, you give the person a 20 and they give you the wrong change, and you walk out to your vehicle and all of a sudden you realize, oh, I got the wrong change. You go back in and you give the proper change. So it varies. The semantics of guilt can go, all over the place. But when I feel, if it's being used for controlling, which absolutely the powers that should not be are doing, then that's when it's absolutely negative. But if you can utilize it to change a negative, then aren't we winning? Thank you.
I'll clap that one, Nacy. especially like the robotics voice at the beginning. No, you're right. No, so if we can get it to a positive outcome, we can change it. And it's doesn't, even though we've talked about it like all in these different angles, it still looks like it's tainted with black dripping down a whiteboard. That's how I see it. And we are all
Hello
guilty.
again.
Hi, Polly.
I'll try one more time here.
Yep, we can
Can
hear you.
everybody hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
I just wanted to say that the reason why they use guilt and the reason why it's so effective is because, in a way, guilt is a measure of your own conscience. So if you didn't have a conscience, there's likely a good chance that you don't feel any guilt whatsoever. So to put a positive light on guilt, if you've ever experienced it, it means you do have a conscience in there somewhere.
Agree.
True. True that.
And this is what guilt does as a weapon. It preys on your conscience and it makes you question your worth and your goodness. And that's why it's such an effective tool for controlling people, in my opinion. That's how they use it.
Well, this is something that I've been pondering, because I talk about the pineal gland, and when you giggle, you have your pineal gland, it secretes, I just call it giggle juice because you feel good about it, and we find that in our foods, especially in the American diet, with the additives, preservatives, and the fertilizers and the pesticides, they are causing physical change in our brain operation. Our neurotransmitters and receivers are being manipulated, along with the I can't remember what that's called, the whole ganglia of all your glands right there in the center of your brain behind your eyeballs. But it made me wonder if the powers that should not be are putting into our foods these components that are causing our brains not to function optimally, could they also be using ingredients to where they can hit? I don't know if you guys have heard of the reptilian gland in our brain. So what if they're giving us compounds within our food that stimulates the reptilian gland, that increases it, because allegedly this gland, and forgive me for not remembering what it's called, its technical term, but this gland, it dullens our empathy. It dullens our ability to feel guilt.
So what's a
Because
guilty pleasure then?
listening to your voice. Okay, I lied. I'm guilty. I meant Lisa's voice, but I didn't want to say that. So I lied. Sorry. I'm guilty.
I was just thinking when we're talking about guilt like a weapon, or for bad things as well, if we can put it into our own conscience or that side of stuff, then in our hands it sort of becomes a teacher, doesn't it? Like if you're using, if you're aware of guilt yourself, and so even as before in grace or whatever reason, if you're it's just everywhere, and it's not good. But if it's in your own hands and you can use it to sort of guide you and teach you, and because it is sort of holding you in check to yourself, because no one can make you feel guilty unless you've somehow talked yourself into something you should have done. If you're conscious of just what you're doing is what you're doing, it's different.
Well, I guess it would
Guilt's a teacher.
depend upon the individual and how close they are to your core. Because seemingly the people that are closest to you, can easily make us feel guilt. And I apologize. I have my my PPP friends are just showing up, so I'm going to be listening and then PPP and
And
so
backing off
I'll
every now and
come
then.
back if I can.
Okay. Okay. All right, so let's move on. What questions haven't we answered? And we've brought up a few other questions. So what did I have before? Guilt seems like a conglomerate of emotions that have mutated somehow. I think I agree with that because the face of guilt is a weird looking one. It looks kind of mutated.
I was late to the party. Did anyone discuss the correlation between guilt and shame?
We did. We had a little laugh about that. But add to it, please, Polly. Well, the question was, why does guilt carry shame? And we sort of went into that, but please give us your opinion.
Well, I was going to ask, what would guilt look like if it didn't have any shame at all? Would it exist even?
Naked. It'd seem naked.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. Like, is guilt, is shame a fruit of guilt? Like,
Or is
that's
it
what it
or is it the
produces?
root? Is it the fruit or is it the root?
Right.
Or is shame
Exactly.
the
I don't
applied
know.
guilt?
Because many people walk around their whole lives with their foundation, and it's shame and guilt,
Yeah.
and they aren't even aware of it.
Yep. Everyone's checking now. Where am I standing? Is my fade date? What's my
Oh,
fade
I check a lot about
Everyone's
that.
checking.
And everyone.
It's easy. It's easy to get mixed up, though.
It
Because
is.
sometimes I can have a false sense of responsibility, so therefore it's a false sense of guilt. Like, I'm not responsible for that person. I have no guilt. They're grown people. So I have to talk to myself a lot about it. I'm my best therapist.
I'll tell you a little story. What
It's
happened to
people
me?
that pick up on that you got to worry about because they'll try to use guilt to like get you to do stuff.
Right, exactly.
But you know, the
Manipulation has to have guilt in order to work. It has to. Or shame.
I'll tell you a little story. What happened to
about
me?
being shameless.
What happened to me when I was a kid, and it taught me about the silence of truth and how people want to put shame onto you. So I was at my auntie's house because she looked after us when Mum was working, and I was with her kids. And next door neighbour had lizards and snakes in tanks out the back. And as you know, I love lizards and snakes, and at that young early age I still liked them. And I asked if I could go next door, because the lady was in our house at the time, and have a look at her things. And she said yes, but on one condition. And I said, what was that? And she said, you have to close the gate behind you when you go in, and when you come back you have to close it when you leave. And I went, yep, no worries. So she goes home, and a little while later there was nothing to do, so I ran next door, opened the gate, made sure I closed it behind me, went and said hello to all the lizards and snakes. When I'd finished talking to them, I came back and I made sure I closed that gate, and I come in. 5 minutes later, that lady was knocking at the door, saying to my auntie, she wanted to talk to me, and she was like a flame of fire. And all I remember is, because I'm only little, I was even littler then, looking up at this tall lady, and she's ripping it into me. You left the gate open, rah, 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 rah. And I'm like, no, I didn't. This went on for like ever. It felt like forever. I'm trying to defend my truth, saying I didn't. I made sure I closed the gate, because I did. I didn't do it. And in the end, I took her guilt. I took it on and took her statement of you are guilty, and I said, all right, I'll wear that. Yeah, I'm guilty. I did it. Right, are you happy now? That's what I said to her as a little kid. And I remember saying, right, are you happy now? And thinking I could get away with it, because if I said that to my mum, she'd smack me. Anyway, she was happy that I disclaimed that, and walked out of the room, went into the lounge room where everyone was standing. And my other cousin, he walked through the back door, he stood in the back door, he said, what's going on? One of the women said that I'd left the gate open, and he went, no, I did it. Now, everyone was witness to that, but silence reigned, and nobody went, oh, we were wrong, we just put guilt on that girl. She claimed her to be guilty, not innocent.
Wow.
Yeah, and no one said a word. And I remember standing there checking him and going, he spoke truth. Truth made the air still, like it does in this show, everything goes quiet. But no one would take the honour and stand up and say sorry or anything like that. Like, I forgive them, I see where they're at, and I grew beyond it. But it taught me a really big lesson about people and guilt and shame and how it works. And I think...
And, Luna, the foundation of shame and guilt, that's when people begin to have a facade that I didn't do it. Right away, you want to pass the buck or make an excuse. And I think it's also the reason why people can't say, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. Why is it so hard to just ask someone to forgive you if you've offended them? I can be sorry someone's hurt even if I know I didn't intend on hurting them. I can feel bad that they're hurt. It doesn't mean I'm owning guilt. I don't know. It's just so much easier than making up a bunch of crap and stories instead of just taking responsibility.
Well,
I screwed up.
And why was it so important for her to be right at that moment in time? I mean, we've all been in those situations, right? And we've all probably at one point said, all right, I'll just to shut these people up. Fine, I did it, But what is in it? What was in it for that woman? She had to have you say that.
Mm-hmm. I realised that she would...
What are you guilty of? Just because...
I realised she'd drill me until I admit. I'll tell you, she actually did me a favour, because you try and talk me into something now, you got Buckley's. So she did me a favour. I was at a young age. But I actually looked at that woman and I realised, I actually felt sorry for her like that, and I realised that what she'd done to me was so... Like, now I'm an adult and I have my own kids. Like, that wasn't a bad thing. That's kind of unforgivable to drill a little kid like that. That was bad. So, as an adult, I'm looking and I realised that was so bad what she did. She didn't know how to come back from that. That's why. She didn't know how to come back from it. And everyone else would have judged her at that moment. I never read the air. I felt it. But now I'm looking at her, I can read the air. They all would have looked at her, waiting for her to say something. And guilt was placed upon her because she was the guilty party now. The fella walking through the back door admitted his guilt, but she was standing there silent, wearing guilt from both sides now. So how do you come back from that? That's what I thought as a kid. There's no coming back for you. Yeah, I realised there was no coming back for that lady.
It's that kind of moment.
But it taught me about people. It was all about learning about.
It's interesting that nobody else said anything though. Do you know what I mean? Like I mean, with her, what
would you say?
But yeah,
well, I know what I would have said.
But for everybody else in the room, what I find is maybe
but it goes back to a lot of our conversation this evening that we're dealing, when we get into this whole guilt and shame stuff, we're dealing with people who it seems almost like life and death if they cannot back off. That their life is dependent on being right.
Yeah.
And actually I've done a lot of workshops and all kinds of trainings and stuff like that in my life about being right or being able to lead a team. You got to get past all that. Like, it isn't about being right. It's about leading the team and allowing for everyone to do what they've got to do, right, in that sort of space. Because, as you said, she left no room for herself, and she left no room for you. Both of you were stuck.
Oh. It was an interesting
both of you got
situation. Yeah. It was a
interesting point where you brought up the word right, and I thought, has anybody talked about why they use the word guilty in court? So you're either if you're in court, you're either innocent, or you're supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, But there's pretty much two outcomes. There's innocent, which I would say is right, and there's guilty, which I would say is wrong. So there's some kind of other weird attachment that's like attached to the word guilty that implies some kind of wrongdoing or being in the wrong.
Punishment itself.
And so it's almost like you can't even be apologetic or have a meaningful apology without having a sense of guilt.
You mean in that situation, or?
Well, right. So in that situation, that the woman who was wrong is just not affected by any guilt at all. The conscience level is just not there. It might even be
Luna,
completely
right?
Yeah.
It might just be completely oblivious because children don't deserve the same respect as adults in some people's minds. So there's that too, right? So there might have been just no reason to feel any guilt at all for this person. There's just like simply no reason to, just from the way that they are.
So in other words, guilt is a way for me, let's just say I was that woman, guilt was a way for me to unload my burden of responsibility on the nearest person who I think I could dump it on, and that happened to be a child or whoever's there, right? So
The
guilt.
easiest victim.
Right.
The one you can get away with bullying like that.
Bullying, yeah, there's another
That's
piece
what
of
it
guilt.
was.
Right.
She got
Yes.
pleasure out of shaming Luna. Because even after she found out she was wrong, she could not be
Back
wrong.
up.
Because Luna
Exactly.
had to have that shame. That woman was not well. She's one of those that have a foundation of shame and guilt. And they
Right.
take pleasure because they need that to feel better about themselves. It's
Exactly.
so sick. And it's so subtle. When you're a child, you can't understand those abstracts, those subtleties of manipulation. You think brain developmentally very literally. And so you're just confused your whole childhood. You don't know what the heck's going on, but you learn how to navigate it somehow. Sorry.
I wonder if guilt is also part of the black and white world. In other words, there's only two ways to go, right? That's it. There's no grays. There's no negotiation. Guilt only gives you one way in some ways. Because there's no way to navigate around it.
And
There's either innocence or guilt.
Exactly. Well said.
And then your world has to get smaller and smaller because eventually things are going to break your illusion of your ideal self. I mean, we all have an ideal self. I wish I could be kinder. I wish I could be, and it's like our ideal self, and that's like okay. But when people don't have a lot of their real selves and they want the world to see their ideal selves, it's not based in reality. And it's going to start crumbling in on them. So they madly have to fix up the walls and the windows and everything to keep this facade around them. Am I making sense?
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect, son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I take a puff pass towards Speculation Island here on guilt just to try something?
Yep.
Yeah.
We'll all come along. You got cocktails to serve on the way?
Me and
Plenty,
Coffee. One more.
plenty of rum.
Peanuts.
We got it all. Whatever you can dream up, we got on this journey. But if you're looking for guilt in a situation, you have to have the facts to come up with it. And we're sitting in this situation about the jib jab being forced upon us. And I think back to a certain order that was signed, turning control of this country over to an entity. And that entity has been in control And part of that order gave 70% of all funding directly from the U.S. government to the governors. And that included all the propaganda they were getting and the propaganda to the companies to keep running and producing to a point. And we're watching our politicians. When I saw Luna's politicians going absolutely nuts, like somebody was about to shoot them in the back of the head if the people didn't perform as trained SEALs.
Yeah.
And our government looking like we're going to have to put you, Nano, into a camp, and Bernays he's with you. So, I mean, so that's where I got a reality break here, or I'm just on the island and enjoying myself in a nice haze here at the moment on my puffs.
No, Bernays, you're right. I think if we go back to Luna's story, we are dealing with that woman. All of us on some level is dealing with that woman.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I never thought of it that way.
I was thinking it's funny how much, I know this is going to sound stupid, but I thought to myself, I was thinking about Luna as being a little girl. Like, that is just a fascinating thought in itself, actually. But I was thinking to myself about her. What about her that she's going to come storming in there in the first place, right? You know, what's got a firecracker up that, you know, there? And I thought, because if it was me, how many times have you just closed the damn gate and not said a word? I mean, is it really that? What kind of lesson, what compulsion do you have that instead of just closing the damn gate and going, damn kids, and walking back inside and going about your day, instead of that, what inspires you to go storming next door to rip the shit out, or rip into the little girl next door? And I think it's because they think they're so right that they become righteous, and like they're fighting the cause, so they've got to be, you know, I don't know, but like, why would you just not close the gate? Why you got to go attack a little kid in the first place, and if you're someone that's always got to be right, you know, unless you think you've got some sort of righteous,
Well,
you know,
I know she probably never
thing
had
to do
kids, because I wouldn't have expected kids to do that.
And Luna, you know what? My guess is you've always been the kind of person you are now. You're very strong. And Connie said, a beautiful child inside. Maybe the woman couldn't deal with you.
Oh,
And so
probably,
what
yeah.
she did
Yeah.
was play the game and decide, you know, you could, okay, if you were talking about guilt and innocent, you were an innocent child. Not only were you an innocent child, but you were innocent of wrongdoing in this event. And so she went after you. And I think people go after people with innocence.
Yes.
they do.
It makes them uncomfortable.
Yes.
So she went after you, maybe not consciously. And I think that's where the power of guilt comes in, right? Guilt or innocence, right? And so
that was one of the things. Why do people put guilt upon each other? Is it unknowingly? Like, I looked at this woman. I didn't think about it because I was a kid, but what I saw, I just knew something said to me, don't worry about her, because she's just like that. I kind of feel sorry for her. Like, I remember looking at her, kind of felt sorry for her, because I realised she didn't have things that other people I knew had.
yeah.
Yeah. I never
People
let
that have
her-
lost their innocence are often the ones who are most afraid of guilt, and so they need to shove it onto somebody else.
Yeah, that's why it's like a piece of clothing. I wore that piece of clothing that day, knowing that I could take it off. So, and that's what I realised. That's why it's like a piece of clothing. You can take it off. You can put it on and take it off, and never put it back on again, or wear it all the time. That's how it feels, and it's up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
like
and
There's more of a genuosity towards for guilt if it's brought on by the person who's feeling it, instead of being cast upon them by somebody else. Like somebody can feel guilt just on their own, like just consciously, oh shit, I fucked up, you know. They don't need someone to tell them that they did something wrong. So in a way, that kind of guilt is, I think, useful for some people.
And that was my
To help
first
them get better.
question. Was it given to us for that reason and we abused it? Did Creator put it in there, as a small tiny dot, just so when we're sitting there in that silence by ourselves, we can check our thoughts and actions without having someone
Like your
else around?
conscience,
Yeah, and somehow...
your conscience.
Yeah, and somehow it got out of control and we've abused that thing and made it into the monster that it kind of is. It mutated. That's what I meant about mutating before. Somehow it's mutated and got out of control. Because
That's just guilt.
in a good society and tribal ways and stuff, we didn't do that to children or other adults. Everyone was honourable enough to know what the go was, and our stories and that taught us about not to do that to each other because of how it is, but to let it be active in us to teach ourselves, but not to let it out to hurt others. That's how it seems. So maybe it's not the scary monster after all, and now we've pulled all the veils away of.
Oh, I think you bring up a good point. And again, if we go back to all the roundtables, what we're learning is, or what I'm learning, how many words have been hijacked, how many words are even virtue, right? Virtue signaling. We went over and talked about that word, which should be a wonderful word. But again, and I find myself even unconsciously not using tons of words once they're hijacked. No longer anything I choose to use because it just feels like I'm being abused. And so you're right. Shame and guilt might have been part of the conscience, and a conscience is like Jiminy Cricket said, let that be your guide. If it's a small voice and it's within reason, but when it gets louder and starts beating us up, then it becomes our keeper. And then we take on the burden of the people who don't want to take on their own burden, their own guilt, their own misbehavior, as it were.
See,
It's almost as if you could switch the word guilt for responsibility.
Yes, exactly.
So maybe we should separate those two words and take the word guilt back for what it's really. Guilt, I think, is a very personal thing. You can't, like, shifting responsibility, I think, is easier than shifting guilt. Guilt is like internal.
Wow.
I think that when I hear you, Sharon, every time, and you bring it up frequently, which tells me it really bothers you, how they've stolen language and changed the meanings and like really brought confusion to our speech. And I listen to that and I think, I will not give up the rainbow. I don't I don't care who else says it's theirs. It's mine. And if I use words, virtue, I mean virtue. And if someone doesn't understand my speech, I will clarify for them. If they want to act like a mad person about it, I'm done with them. I will not contend with you. You're lost. Just don't talk to me. That may sound really gross, but I'm not going to censor myself because other people can't understand English. I speak very clearly, and I know what I mean, and I mean what I say. So there's that.
Guilty of having no shame here.
There's that. That's being shameless about it, isn't it?
Well,
There
I
is
think,
definitely some.
Connie, I think that's a good. I think all of us will probably be. Well, let me speak for me. You and I are saying same thing. We're not. You're saying I'm not gonna. I'm gonna keep using the words, and I think basically I'm waking up to the depth of which they've tainted our speech, and I don't think I've actually decided what I'm going to do about it. I think your point to taking it back is great, but I also don't mind coming up with other words as well, right? Because I don't want anything to do with them. And so
But
it's
the
almost
difference
like
is I
it's
never
almost
gave
like
them
an
up.
I
I don't,
think it's unconscious on
Sharon,
my part. But
unless you give them up, you don't have to take them back. I never gave up my speech.
right.
So I have nothing to take back from anybody. I'm not a victim. I'm my own person.
I don't feel like a victim either. I feel like I'm realizing what's been happening and I'm making choices on how to deal with it. I don't feel victimized. I feel like I get to make some choices about what words I choose to use. That's all I'm saying. I'm not giving up the rainbow. I'm not giving up certain things. But I think this, what we've done on the roundtable for me, has been an awakening. I mean, I just had no idea to what extent they've hijacked things. That's all I'm saying. So
I'm
what I'm going to do
sorry.
about it, I don't
I
know. No,
kind
that's
of,
okay.
yeah. No, it is a process. It isn't okay because I have been thinking about all this stuff. I mean, I live alone. I don't work outside the home. I'm disabled. So I have a lot of time to ponder stuff, you know? So, sometimes I come off as know it all, and I am so far from that.
Are
So
you
I
feeling guilty,
apologize.
Connie? Don't feel guilty.
No, I
Yeah.
think that I came off a little strong, and I'm passionate about everything. I love
That's all right.
passionately.
You're a
I'm opinionated, so
fiery
yeah.
woman. Have you round on a cold evening and light you up. No, no, we love you, Connie. So I'll
Oh,
pose.
I know what you mean, and I appreciate you sharing. Seriously, I think I haven't decided what to do. Do you know what I mean? I think I like what you've done too, so I understand.
I love it. I do. It's great that people can actually speak their minds, and nobody will take great offense at each other. And
Right.
other than here, in the real world, it doesn't seem that this can happen. You must have your wording correct, your pronouns. Yeah, I'm lost
Yeah.
once I get too far out there.
That really, anyone here, we don't feel shame or guilt. And if you're listening to this in the future, or right now, or in the past, and you don't like what you hear, just turn it off. Don't put anything on us because we are just being honest and truthful. And we have to learn to
Yep.
accept each other. And if you listen to the other talks that we've had, it's all about learning, accepting, forgiving. I'm looking forward to the near future when we have a couple of more words and we go back and we review everything that we've done and stitch it together. I'm really looking forward to that. So I pose another question. Can animals feel guilt and shame?
Yes.
Do we put it on them, or is it in nature? Like, if you look...
That I wonder. I mean, are they born with guilt? Does their guilt go back as far as ours do? Because I don't know much about it, but when you come home after a long day and you look on the floor and you look at said animal, whether it be a cat or dog, and they think they've done something, they have a certain look to their face, like, don't look at me, I did something. So
My cat
good
Not
has
thing.
the cats.
absolutely
The
no
cats.
guilt.
The cats don't have guilt. Maybe the dogs do, but not the cat. The cat's like, oh well, hey, bad day. Oops.
My cat just says, put money in the front end and throw what comes out of the other end in the garbage.
So, is that feeling guilty?
We
though, or
are
just
we
being
are at
cunning?
service to the cats.
Actually, I was
That's
looking...
true. I mean, I guess that is more so for dog people.
I was thinking of perhaps gorillas or orangutans, and that they're like us. And if you watch them in their daily lives and how they interact, they feel it. I think if one of them done something, they show you, because they're very verbal with their body as well. So they'd show you shame. Yeah, good on your bet. Put another picture there. Yeah, they're very verbal with their body, so they put their hand up on their head and show you shame that way, or guilt.
I've seen chimpanzees do some things that would require a severe lack of guilt.
Ah, yes, true. They're just comfortable with their bodies, Polly.
Right? They know which bits are the best bits.
Encouraging others to be the same.
And they have fun too, yeah, good on them. But they have no shame or guilt, that's right. That's where we do, I think that goes back to the trick of Adam and Eve thing. And something pulled it out of us and made us realise certain things. And it makes us a little different, but then when we go to native people, there were those of us that we ran around stark naked. There was no problem. No one had bad thoughts or anything. We were all good about it because it was just that way. Yeah, it makes you wonder. I've got to say, this is a tough one for me this week. What is guilt? Just getting my head around it because it's a mutated word, and I had to look at the mutant. No, yeah, it was just different. I never put that much thought into it. I've always tried to identify it and avoid it or deflect it, so it didn't get me. I've never actually stood still long enough to go, what are you really?
But if you change the word guilt to responsibility, would you still have the same response?
Well,
or wouldn't you gladly take a responsibility?
Depends. I'm old now, so any responsibility I take means a lot of energy I haven't got. When I was young, it was a different story.
What if this was something that you did or something that you chose?
Something I did and I chose. I know, but you got me confused now. Taking advantage of me there, Polly.
How much do you think it's got to do with the shame then?
I'm trying to think of the of the way that they use the
usually
word guilt.
If I stuff up,
it's so negative. But if you're responsible for something that you're responsible for doing something that you should be ashamed of. It's like people are more willing to take the responsibility than carry the guilt.
True, because I'm more likely to cough up and go, you know what, I fucked up. That was my fault. I did that. How do I fix it? Can we get it all sorted out and can move on? I tend to do that. I'll put my hand up straight away. Hoo-hoo, it was me.
Right, so it's like responsibility is the weapon against guilt, I guess, maybe in a way.
Yeah, that kind of, because I just said I spent all my life deflecting it or avoiding it. Because deflecting it, that's what I learned. If I cough up straight away, no one can hold it against me, can they? So if I had walked in that door that day as a kid and went, I shut the gate, everyone listen to me, I shut the gate. Come and have a look for evidence, shut the gate. No one would have said anything. When that lady come through, they would have looked at her and went, she already told us she shut the gate, what are you going on about? So putting your hand up and going, yeah, it was me. I call it owning your own shit. Naysay's going to throw that back at me. Owning your own shit. That's what I call it. And be proud of it. And if you do stuff up, be proud, because out of that stuff comes good things. You learn, you grow, you become stronger, more wiser, and more aware. And you've got to own your own stuff. If you do fuck up, own it. So,
well said, Luna.
Thank you. So
personal armor.
I'm going to spend later going, who have I put guilt on unknowingly? And was it plausible, or was I in the wrong? And then run back to them and go, or fix it somehow.
Is it guilt? Can we really put guilt on another person? Doesn't it take someone in a space ready to receive that guilt?
Doesn't it have to be acknowledged? somewhere, even if it's just in ourselves, for guilt to be anything at all.
So if we just pretend it doesn't exist, it'll go away.
Well, I don't know, I'm working on that angle myself personally. That's what I'm pursuing right now.
Is that what you're trying?
Yeah, I know you've already been there. I'm putting myself often in that position.
How's that going for you?
That you've already been there and know the answer. Don't tell me though, I'm doing it myself. I'm fine. That's the one I'm pursuing. You're not allowed to cheat. You know, you're not allowed to give me any cheap answers.
Go ahead, Bernice. You go first. I just wanted to just respond to Luna, but go ahead and go first.
Who said that you had to accept that, accept the guilt? Because that is actually true. You have to take that guilt, and like I said before, when I was traveling to the island, to know you have the truth. You know what the guilt is. So it's on you whether you're going to accept the guilt, I guess is what I'm saying.
Right.
And
Agreed with you.
Enlighten yourself enough to know what is the truth. Nobody else can do that for you if you're not looking for it.
I think, too, if you ignore it, that's not feeding it. So I think that's a good thing, Luna.
True.
There's ways to justify guilt. I've had guilt come and go within a matter of seconds.
Was it just
Like
fizzing?
I've had guilt last for like 2 seconds when I know I shouldn't be eating something, but then when I put it in my mouth, that guilt goes away. And I keep eating.
Goes away to come back another day.
Little guilty little pleasures, is it? The guilty little
It's a
things.
guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
So it's almost as if the guilt is increasing the level of pleasure in a way, in a weird way. It wouldn't be as pleasurable if it wasn't guilty.
Yeah, because this is what. All right.
Being naughty.
No, when you got food, whatever energy you put in it before you eat it goes in your body. So why would you want to put guilt in your food and then eat it? So next time you have that disgustingly delicious ice cream with all that stuff added to it, eat it and don't feel guilty, because you don't want to eat food that has guilt on it. It's not good for your stomach. It'll upset it.
That's a good point. Thank you.
As I said, Luna, it goes away really quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't stop us from eating it.
It usually comes
As soon as
out
it's
in
in
like
the mouth.
the form of a burp or something like that.
It's funny, my head will say that, but my body will tell me something different. Because it actually happened to me the other day. I had a moment of weakness, and I downed this beautiful, delicious, milky, creamy, sugary thing, and it was hot night, and it was cold, and I let myself have it, and 3 days later I'm still fixing myself up, because it was full of everything I don't normally have, and my body actually got so shocked I thought I was going to die. When it was all over, I realised it was just a whole lot of air and some other things mixed in, and then I wasn't going to die at all. But ignoring guilt that night, I had to pay for it, I'm telling you. And I'm not going to do it again. I'm going to wear that badge of guilt when it comes to dairy products. For my own good. There's a positive outlook on guilt. I'm using it in a positive way to help me sustain my strength and resist bad food.
It's almost like you find ways to justify your guilt.
I used
In
my
those
previous
situations.
guilt. Yeah, I used my previous guilt to justify my current guilt.
Yeah,
That's
it's
a good
pretty
one.
bizarre word.
My previous guilt of eating and then dieting, losing weight, and buying clothes again, and using now I feel guilty because I bought clothes, so it justified it. Guilt justifies guilt.
Ooh, it feeds itself. That can be, does it
It just
multiply?
keeps repeating.
Does it give birth and multiply? And is that why it spills out all over the place and we can't control it sometimes? When you actually look at that and you look at everybody on the earth and how many minds we have and everyone that feels guilt, that's a whole lot of guilt. Whether it be for 1 second or a lifetime, it's still a whole lot of guilt. Maybe we should have a day and call it the guilt-free day or something, and burn clothes or something to represent guilt.
Yeah, I've been sitting here and I've been reflecting on the word guilt and how my daily, just in the past, since I transitioned and the past couple of weeks, and how it's been guilt-free. Everybody is accepting of one another and things are just the way they are. I haven't felt any personal guilt other than possibly not scooping out the litter box on time.
Yeah, we got a question in the chat room there. What about the times where you've had to do things that you didn't want to do, but no one else could do them, and you had to do it, and it was a sad and sorry thing, and you knew that when you did it, you'd feel guilty, but you did it because no one else could do it, and it was just you that was trying to do the right thing at the time, and everyone knew it was the right thing at the time, but it also bore a percentage of guilt. They're the moments in life that are really hard to get your head around, because you got to compromise somewhere at that moment. Yeah, I know you've been there and done that, Donnie. That's why I brought it up. That was Brother Donnie's experience.
I mean, like when we have to take the dogs or cats to the vet.
Yeah.
Kind of end of life stuff.
Yep.
It's a different experience for cat people.
You know.
Well, I can't speak for every cat people in here.
Well, you know.
For me, it's a different experience between a cat and a dog.
You know, and as the parent, you got to bury the animal and stuff, and you know, them moments. You know, there's lots of them in life. I don't think we want to go for them because they can be sad, but them moments. I think it's a compromise there. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and it all makes up the situation. And I think that's where you need someone else to come and give you a hug and say it's all right, and pat you on the back and say you did the right thing. Don't feel bad about it. You shouldn't have to harbour that feeling because you did the right thing and it's all right and we love you. And they take it, it helps to take that piece of clothing off that we had to wear to do that
I
job.
do need help. Like, if I get overwhelmed with a whole, incident that happens, that I'm all disoriented, like, what's going on? And it's real hard for me to not process it out loud to somebody so I can check my own perception because I'm so emotionally involved. Does that make sense? No? Okay.
Kinda. I think our depth of emotion, because sometimes I can be like that. I'll be emotionally involved in something else, and then other things I can help because I don't actually feel it that deep. And then I walk away and go, why didn't I feel that deep? And then I thought, it wasn't that I was being heartless or anything. It's just that I understand that situation, and therefore it gives me the knowledge not to have to raise my emotions. Does that make sense? Does anything make sense today? This is the hardest week I've ever had to do. What is guilt? And it's, what's the date over there? It's the 31st. We all know what that is, people. That's Halloween.
Could guilt be a personal mind trap?
Oh, yes. It can take you in some terrible places.
I mean, could it be designed that way?
A mindset, yeah. Especially if you're a child and they've used that as a tool upon you all your life, and that's the clothes. They've put those clothes upon you all your life, and you get to an adult and you don't even know you're wearing them until someone says, man, you want to take that load off? You're having trouble walking there. And they look at you and go, what? And as you go to look, you realise that people have put stuff on you all your life and you've been carrying it. You didn't even know it was there because you were a child and you grew up in it. That's what I've observed in our community. We have a lot of this stuff. Donnie understands that. That's a hard thing in our community that I haven't really talked about, the ugly side of life. But that's what happens. A lot of kids walk around, they're dressed in all this guilt and shame. They don't know any different. Get to an adult and they're in tears and they're all fucked up, honestly. And all it is getting them to recognise these things that happened to them and where it was placed upon them. And as they take them off, they feel this relief. It's, like being reborn again.
That is so powerful.
There's not enough of it, though. That's the problem. Because we don't even know the concept of it. We were talking today about what is guilt and all the things and its face and how it looks and feels and how it works. And we're only just learning truly about what it is. So,
would you say that shedding guilt is how you regain innocence?
Yes, Polly. I would say it has something to do with that. Because remember, this conversation runs from last week about do we lose our innocence? And yeah, I think so. It has something to do with it, Polly. You shed that skin, and you're that child. You're that child again, that was created, made all beautiful and shiny.
So I guess you could say that we never really lose our innocence. It just gets like a bunch of guilt freaking thrown at it from all different directions until you can't see it anymore.
Yep. Tarnished. Yeah. Soiled, it says. Yeah. Okay.
I wonder for you.
Well, it's good to know that the people who seem that they're lost all their innocence they're really just covered in everybody else's guilt. That's encouraging to me.
It makes you look at life different. And I'm looking at all the workplaces and that the bosses use guilt. You better get this work done if you want that promotion. And they can just lead you on forever. It's if we actually look at it, it is everywhere. And I think if we're educated about it, we get to recognise it, know what it is. We can rise above it then and start, living a life where it becomes the lesser thing and goes back. It goes back to that tiny little voice that it was meant to be that just guides us when we're sitting there quietly. So, did you want to say something, Lisa?
No, I was just thinking about you because I know this. I've been sitting next to you. I know you're saying it's a hard week for you on a topic wise, and I thought I know a bit of the story that you've had shame thrown at you a lot in your life personally, like that story you told.
That's not shame, sister. That's shit. That's why I'm brown.
It's that.
No.
But even in that moment, right? Even though you've just been vindicated, you also, along with shame, came silence.
Yeah.
So either you're being like there was shame, there was silence around shame. Yeah. And so then you're left like as a kid going, okay, so you're forced to know what you know for yourself. Because no one's saying nothing, but everyone just knows now that you didn't do it. But you were guilty of something beforehand, and you've just had guilty of something thrown at you a lot in life. And I just,
So if I'm guilty before I'm proven innocent,
but
I don't really give them.
No, but upside is because they did it to you from a kid.
Yeah,
from a kid,
they did me a favour.
In it with an innocence I love about you.
Oh, thank you, sister.
Because you still always.
All right, getting a bit personal now. Back off. All right, everyone, we'll start rounding this up. So I don't even know how to go back over everything we've talked about. I've still got my questions in front of me, but fathoming everything that we've talked about today in a couple of words. Forget about it. Everyone's had something to say, and it was brilliant. Certainly we'll look at it in a different way. Certainly realise that it can be a gift and keep you strong, and it becomes like an anti-guilt liquid that you can wear, so no one can put it on you anymore. Certainly felt vulnerable tonight telling you that story, but that's okay. So we'll round it up now, and everyone take a turn, go through anything you want to add to it, or just go over what you've got from it. Go, Jules, you're first. I love that kitten, Jules. By the way, for those that can't see, there's a little kitty in a chair with his hand up every time Jules goes to say something. It is so cute. Go, Jules.
So yeah, sitting here, I've learned a lot about guilt and how you can shed guilt, and there is no guilt when I say if you look at the word guilt, and when I say this to you guys, it's because you do shine so bright. Guilt is spelled Gulit. If you break it down, G-U lit. Keep shining.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's beautiful, Jules. Thank you.
I'll say this to close it out. I have no guilt for sitting here and discussing the world with everyone here, and it's been very enjoyable, and I thank you.
Thank you, Bernays. We always love your wisdom at this table. Sharon?
Yeah.
I just want to thank Polly for showing up tonight. We really missed his corner of the table, so Polly's been great that you showed up. And this was a very good conversation, as always. So thank you, Luna, for leading the round table.
Thank you. Connie?
Oh my gosh, all these concepts are all just floating all around my head. It was just I think it has to be personal almost. It would have been boring if it was all just a philosophical talk. I think personal stories of how people perceive it and the effects it's had on their life, even just a story, that's what I learned from other people's stories. So I loved it. Thank you so much for including me.
Thank you, Connie. Lisa, you want to say something? Polly? No, go, Polly. I was going to...
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. And yeah, it's always a guilt-free conversation in these round tables. There's never any shame, it's always very, very comfortable. No one ever has to feel guilty about saying anything that's on their mind. That's why I like it here.
Cool. Thank you, Polly. And we love you. I love the corner. That chair will always be yours. You know that.
I should explain. It's still part of the round table. There's just a little corner piece that sticks out where I put my drink in the ashtray.
But no one sits there unless you're there. That's how no one uses that space. And we tried it out, but believe me, the couple of weeks you haven't been here, we all had a turn at trying it out, but it kind of didn't fit right, and we acknowledged that we were doing the Polly. Thanks, but I'm glad. Thanks for coming. And Nase's busy because he's having a party with his friends.
Oh no, they're willing to sit in silence so that I may say a thing or two, because they've heard me babbling on and babble on much longer than all of you. So I think I'll share with all of you because I care so much. I feel guilty every time I do heroin. So is that a good thing that I don't because of that guilt? I know that's the extreme, but I'm wondering if you know what I mean. If guilt can bring you positivity, then embrace it. But if it keeps you in negativity, give Luna a call because she's good at bringing you back into the positivity. And I'm going to hit this one more time. Toodles.
Thank you, Brother Nisi. And, okay, here we got left there. Lisa, what do you want to say?
Oh.
Here we go.
Thanks, Mason. I know about that. That's that guilty pleasures we were talking about. Yeah, but if it does bring you positivity, it's always nice. You know, it's funny because I do hit Luna for that very reason. She's always been that person that I ring. Yeah.
Oh, you just like shiny
And
things.
no, I do like shiny things, but I also like watching and listening to what it is that happens on this round table, and I get to stay the night before, and I get to see, like, I went through my own personal little experience for context through all 13 of your round tables in her notebook that's in front of her. And so she's just, the way she captures it is in questions and words and things like that. So it's, I don't know, it's really full and rich what comes out of this kind of round table, because you're all got such, I don't know, unique perspectives, and concepts like this just get real rich, you know. And Connie, I love storytelling, like, so much. And even, I don't know, it's really cool. As for guilt,
so much.
Seriously, as for guilt, I think perhaps maybe that just comes attached to judgment as well. And good judgment is, you know, kind and embracive and whatever in its approach. So yeah, but cheers. Enjoy round tables. Well done.
Thank you for being
Cheers,
here.
and it was lovely having you. Really.
They want you back, look out.
I sneak off and stay the night like a schoolgirl. Eh? Like, I'm turning 50 tomorrow, and I'm having sleepovers.
It's like we're 15. We're 15.
That's
So I want to thank everyone for participating tonight. I really appreciate this every week, and I'm the same. I'm learning something just as well. And I want to thank you out there for listening and hanging in there and being patient with all of us, and hanging in to the end. I want to thank Creator for making all this possible.
Yes.
And live life guilt-free. It'll be okay. Work your way through it. Don't wear the clothes that you don't want to wear. And until next week, we'll see you there. Yalu, everyone.
Yalu.
Yellow.